Hello everybody and welcome to the Battle for the Virginia Central Railroad custom multiplayer game, Episode 2, The Dawn of Battle. In the first part, if you missed it, we did discuss the initial setup for this custom multiplayer game. We talked about the general rules that we're going to be using, and we talked about the various fog of war elements which would be in place during this battle. In Episode 2, we're going to meet the teams a little bit more. We're going to watch as both sides make their battle plans, and then we're going to sit down and analyze those plans and take a look at them from our vantage point high above the battlefield. And then we're going to watch as the two armies make their first moves in this game. So let's just go ahead and pull up the initial map of the battlefield. This is how it looks on turn number 1, just so you can kind of use it as a reference if you need to. You have the Federals down south of the South Anna River, where the Confederates do not expect them to be, and the Confederates moving to the northwest along the Virginia Central Railroad. We're going to begin with the Federal side of all this. This is dawn, September 19th, 1863. For the Federals, they have Walt. He will be their overall commander, with Robert as his executive officer. Ed will command the 1st and 2nd Corps as John Newton. Chris will command the Federal 3rd and 5th Corps as George Sykes. Kyle will command the 6th Corps as John Sedgwick. And David will command the Cavalry Corps as Alfred Pleasanton. Pulling up the Federal order of battle, you can see that the Army of the Potomac has 95,000 men in it, with 5 infantry corps and 1 cavalry corps. So here is the map of the battlefield from the Federal perspective. Only their troops are visible on this map, and this is what they have to work with at the very beginning. As we recapped in the first part, Meade has moved his army to outflank Lee's and strike them from the south as the Confederates move along the railroad line towards Gordonsville. Buford is to distract Lee as long as possible and keep him focused on the area northwest of Meade's actual position. Meade doesn't know exactly where Lee is at the moment, and his cavalry is late in getting into position on his eastern flank. Pleasanton, with his 2 other cavalry divisions, Buford's being left at Louisa, circled around the Federal Army and are coming up to the right flank of the 3rd Corps. It's just taken them a while to get into position. Meade does have a general idea, though, that the Confederates are somewhere between Bumpus and Beaver Dam. Where exactly they are and where those columns are located, he doesn't know. So the conversation began with Meade saying that our army is strong and we are moving in 3 solid columns across the South Anna River. Any one of these columns could hold their own against a full enemy corps, but we must keep our forces within supporting distance of each other and not let ourselves be spread out. We will look to concentrate around the Bend area between Fredericks Hall and Tollersville. Sykes will guard our right flank while Sedgwick and Newton move to strike the Bend from the south and southwest. Any rebel cavalry we run across should be attacked and pushed aside. Buford will drive on the Bend and look to engage and distract the enemy to keep them moving to the northwest as long as possible. He will then become the Army's left flank north of the Bend. With the orders now given, the Federal officers returned to their commands and began moving their columns towards the South Anna River and beyond. So my quick 2 cents, as I always like to give at the start of these. So to begin with, the Federal plan is actually pretty simple. They're just going to advance across the river, identify where the enemy is located, and attack them. Pretty basic. The Federals are going to keep their forces massed together, and they're all going to move directly on the Bend objective. Their hope is that they can capture that objective and hold that, along with the needed other objectives, and force the Confederates to attack them on ground of their own choosing. Overall, it's not a bad plan. But is this wasting the Union advantage in numbers and also positioning? Not only do they have the Confederates outnumbered, but they're attacking them from the south where they are not expected to attack from. This is an opportunity for an offensive movement by the Federals, and by attacking instead of just trying to gain objectives, they'll be able to control the momentum of this battle more than if they just try to take objectives and then hold them. So I'm not really sure if they're using their numbers to the best of their advantage. Because being outnumbered, the rebels can only respond to so many different columns and threats against them. By massing their forces, are the Federals just making it easier for the rebels to mass their own, and not worry about other columns and other threats to objectives further to the east? Imagine if just the 3rd Corps turned eastward at the very beginning, as you can see on the map. It would change everything. Sure, the 3rd Corps might be in a little bit of trouble if something bad happened, but Lee can't be everywhere at once. And so by sending a corps to the east right at the very start, it would have forced Lee to at least send a division, but more than likely, not knowing what all is there, he probably would have to send an entire corps, and that would just make it that much easier for the rest of the Federals at the Bend and maybe Fredericks Hall to really pour it into Lee and use their numbers to their advantage. Now let's switch over to the rebel situation at dawn. The Confederate team is led by Tom. He will be playing as Robert E. Lee, and Mike will play as his executive officer, Walter Taylor. Tim will play as Longstreet, Chris as Ewell, Ash as A.P. Hill, and David as Jeb Stuart. The Confederate order of battle is on the screen there. The Army of Northern Virginia has 75,000 men, with 3 infantry corps and 1 cavalry corps. Pulling up the battlefield map now from the Confederate perspective, Lee is moving directly from Hanover Junction along the Virginia Central Railroad towards Gordonsville. The rebel move is pretty straightforward. Lee is looking for a battlefield to once more fight Meade and the Army of the Potomac. He is keeping his forces massed together, trying to avoid another situation which occurred just a few months earlier at Gettysburg. He has Stuart out in front this time, and he has the full power of the Army of Northern Virginia behind him. But what the Confederates don't know is that Meade's army is actually massed to the south and preparing to attack them. How quickly the Confederates are going to be able to figure this out and adjust, it's going to be very interesting. I think the battle will hinge on how the Confederates respond to this sudden and unexpected threat from the south. So now let's go into the Confederate command meeting. I believe the enemy army to be stacked up along the Virginia Central Railroad. Moving large forces either north or south of the 2 large rivers on our flanks would only weaken our own force. I believe the Federals will conclude the same and move on us as a consolidated force. But Longstreet had second thoughts. While generally in agreement, I would like to point out that our latest intel is only based on rumors that the Federal Army is moving southeast along the railroad line. I will feel much more comfortable once Stuart ascertains their exact position. So if you recall in part 1, I left a lot of clues in my battle description for the Confederates to unravel. I used a lot of words like rumors and cavalry screens and Meade was being aggressive. And I want to see if the Confederates can somehow break the code and realize that not everything is as it seems in this battle. And I think Longstreet, he smells a rat. So the rebel leaders continued to talk and all agreed upon the necessity of moving quickly to the northwest and grabbing the initiative right at the very start. While we can assume the enemy to be in strength moving along the railroad, we must not allow ourselves to ignore the possibility that the enemy might move part of their force to the north of the North Anna River or the south of the South Anna River. So General Stuart will screen our advance while also pushing out on our flanks and make sure that we will not be surprised from either the north or the south. Our infantry corps will advance directly on the Bend and look to engage and attack the flanks of any enemy force defending that area. Longstreet chimed in again. With Lomax's cavalry brigade still absent on their recon, I feel uncomfortable. It feels like something is coming at us from one of the flanks. If I were Meade, I'd move to the south and attempt to flank us in that direction. General Hill should keep an eye open. AP Hill was actually thinking along those same lines. I recommend sending at least one cavalry brigade to the South Anna River to have a look around. Also, we should send at least something to the north to look in that direction. But I am more concerned with the southern flank of our army, where there is more room to maneuver. But Lee remained concentrated on the center areas. I believe our plan remains the same. While we must take caution to watch our flanks, we must assume the main battle will occur around the bend. We will advance along 3 lines and look to attack, outflank, and defeat any Federal force we find in that vicinity. All 3 corps will advance within supporting distance. No frontal attacks will occur if it is possible that we can outmaneuver the enemy on either flank. Hill will take precautions to watch his left flank with infantry. Realizing that there was still a need and a desire to learn more about what was north of the North Anna and south of the South Anna rivers, Lee did make some adjustments. Stuart will have the hardest assignment. He is to screen our advance while also dispatching forces to recon the areas north and south of the Anna rivers. So, my 2 cents about the whole Confederate battle plan. And this was actually pretty fun to read and to watch the Confederate commanders discuss everything that was going on. So, the rebel plan is very traditional. Find the enemy, outflank them, and destroy them. It's like the Rebel Command Book 101. Find, outflank, destroy. So, is it ever really just that easy? No, it's never really that easy. I wish it was. It's hard to find the enemy sometimes. It's hard to find their flank, and it's definitely hard to destroy them. But the rebels are concerned with being aggressive, and I like that. Taking the initiative and controlling the flow of the battle is always key in every game, and I am impressed with the fact that they are being so aggressive. I think we could all come up with about 50 different plans to choose from here. Whether or not you like the actual rebel battle plan that they have chosen probably depends on your own style of gameplay, and also the fact that you can see the battlefield from above. I often find myself maybe being a little harsh on the commanders, but then I have to step back and say, wait a minute, they don't know everything I know. It's easy for me, sitting here in my little comfortable chair, looking at both sides of the battlefield map at once, to say, why are you doing this or why aren't you doing that? The fact that the Confederates are staying massed together, that Stuart is going to screen their entire army in a normal situation is the 100% right move to make. It just so happens the fortunes of war in this particular battle don't favor that approach. As I said before, how quickly the Confederates can adjust, it's going to be really interesting to see. The lack of clear intel has left them a bit blind for now. As I mentioned, they aren't really sure where Meade is. They're working on the latest rumors that they heard a day or 2 before, and those rumors are incorrect and pretty dangerous because they're moving in a direction in which the Federal Army is actually hitting their flank and possibly their rear. So things are going to be pretty crazy here at the start for the Confederates. And just wait, because there's a few curveballs heading into this game which neither side knows about just yet. I like to have a little fun with my teams playing, so look forward to that here at the end of the video. So now let's go ahead and view the 2 plans on the same map from high above. As talked about earlier, the Federals are just going to move directly on the Bend area in Fredericks Hall and look to capture that central objective. For the Confederates, Stuart's force is to screen their advance, but also to move out to the flanks and try to ascertain what is north and south of the Anna Rivers. The main Confederate army is going to be moving directly along the railroad line, trying to attack the Bend and get around any Federal flank that they can discover. I think it's pretty obvious that the area where the battle is going to first be initiated is probably southwest of the Fredericks Hall area. That's where it's most likely that the 2 forces, the Federal 3rd Corps and the Confederate 3rd Corps, make contact and begin to spot one another. The main question is whether or not the Confederate cavalry can actually uncover the Federal flanking attack before it strikes the unprotected flank of Hill's corps. If they can do that, if they can find out the Federals are coming sooner rather than later, it will really help them in this battle. But let's go ahead and get into it now. Let's get some turns out of the way. Let's have some fun. So the battle begins 5 a.m., September 19th, 1863. We're going to run all the turns right up through the 6:40 a.m. turn. At the start here, there are 86,430 Federals. The only forces that they are missing are the 2 cavalry divisions from Pleasanton's Corps. And for the rebels, they have 74,000 men on the battlefield. They are missing 1,000 cavalrymen, which are rushing to Hanover Junction to spread the alarm about the Federal flanking force. They don't arrive, though, until 9 a.m. So let's go ahead. This is the battlefield map at 4 a.m. This is turn number 1. Neither side moves during this turn. I use it as an admin turn. So the actual first movements will occur at 5 a.m. So if you look at the map now, you're going to see all the forces shift just a little bit as the 2 sides make their first move, and we scroll to the 5 a.m. turn, the end of turn number 2. Nothing very interesting to discuss here. The 2 sides are just moving. Going now to the 5:20 a.m. turn, the Federals are reaching and crossing over the South Anna River, and the Confederates are just moving along the roads to the northwest. Moving again, you can see Stuart getting closer to Frederick's Hall, and the Confederates moving, and the Federals moving all towards the Bend area. But something to look at here is that the rebel cavalry at Frederick's Hall has not moved at all. We are through 3 turns of the game, the 5 a.m., the 5:20 a.m., and the 5:40 a.m. turns, and they haven't moved. And the question is why? Well, Stuart has these orders right now. He is to confirm whether the Yankees are indeed pushing down the railroad, and if they are making any substantial flanking moves outside of the North or South Anna corridor. He's not doing that. He's to prevent the Yankees from glimpsing our infantry movements until as late as possible in the game. I mean, distance is doing that. And also, he is to keep his command intact and limit losses where possible. That's pretty self-explanatory, I think, for any commander. So, I mean, I guess he's accomplishing that by default, but so far, Stuart has really accomplished nothing in this battle. Meanwhile, the Federals have scouted a large area of the battlefield with Buford's division moving towards the Bend, and they've gained far more intel than the rebels have up to this point in the battle. I mean, they've scouted this entire area over the last hour, so they know what's north and south of their flanks a lot more than the Confederates do. I would have really liked to see Stuart be far more aggressive here in the very beginning of this game, moving forces to the north and to the south and also to the northwest and trying to figure out just what's coming at them. I think they're just being too conservative right now. So going back to the overhead map, we're going to go to the 6 a.m. turn. And the 2 sides have now sighted each other along the railroad line near Frederick's Hall. The Confederates have spotted the Federal cavalry coming, and they're going to react to that. Chances are the Yankees will work out that Stuart is there in strength soon. I'm very interested to see how they react to his appearance. So am I, but I'm not really expecting the Federals to do anything crazy like run into an ambush or try to rush upon that objective and capture it. It just doesn't seem like something that they would be willing to do and to risk at this stage in the battle. Moving now to the 6:20 a.m. turn, and not surprisingly, the Federals have pulled rein and are now just observing the Confederates across the way. And during this turn, Stuart really dispersed his force in order to try and ambush and capture any aggressive Federal cavalrymen pushing to the southeast. Again, I'm not seeing any possible way that the Federals just stumble into a massive trap here. To me, they're keeping their distance. They have a lot of small units that even if they did lose a 50-man scouting unit, they aren't going to care. So I'm failing to see what Stuart's accomplishing here at the start. It seems like they're just hoping that the Federals make a mistake. Where is Davis going? I've let Davis kind of meander across the map for a few turns now. You may have noticed him. Why is he going in this general direction? Well, the Confederates talked about at the beginning the possibility that the Federals would make some sort of wide sweeping movement and try to get Beaver Dam, Knowles Station, or Hanover Junction in a large flanking maneuver. And I guess they're hoping to picket, or at least get eyeballs on all these different hexes and objectives way over here in the corner of the map. And I am not a fan at all of this movement. You're going to let the Federals march all that way without being seen? I don't think so. So keeping troops at Beaver Dam and Knoll Station is just a waste of manpower, in my opinion. You've got Wickham's Cavalry Brigade there. They could be doing this job. Not only that, but you're missing the most obvious thing. Instead of trying to hold this line way over here in the rear where Davis's brigade is essentially out of the battle. That's 1,000 men out of this battle completely at this point. If you took that same brigade and you just moved them to this position, think about it. You'd already be in position, right? Davis would already be there. There's only a few roads south of the Little River that you have to worry about, and you can easily cover those roads. Your line is so much smaller. You could use just a few units to get a line of sight on all these different areas. And you'd have a lot more of a warning if the Federals are making this move towards the Little River. I mean, if the Federals make it all the way to Knoll Station in Hanover, I mean, what's Davis going to do? By that point, it's too late, and the Confederates have zero time to react. If the Federals show up and moving in that direction where I just pinpointed their location, right there south of 3rd Corps current position, you're going to have hours and hours and hours to react and to figure out what your next move is. So this plan to detach Davis just doesn't really seem to work for me. Wickham's brigade right there, this is what they should be doing. On a large map, you use cavalry to scout and to picket areas. You do not use infantry. Davis's brigade is just being wasted. So taking all that off the map now, back at the 6:20 a.m. turn, you can see the Federal 3rd Corps is all the way across the South Anna River. All the Federal Corps are making their way towards the Bend area. 6:40 a.m., forces continue to move. Davis towards Beaver Dam, Wickham's catching up to the 3rd Corps, and Stuart continues to do nothing. He has not yet moved anybody to the north or to the south, really, and he's remained pretty stationary. So he's not really gaining any intel about what the Federals are doing. And as for what the Federals are actually doing with their cavalry, as you can see, Buford is actually moving north of the Bend area. He's going to try to scout everything to the north of that area and perform the function of cavalry, which is in fact to scout. While it's always fun to ambush an enemy, you have to know when the enemy's just not biting on the bait, and at this point, the Confederates should know the Federals are not biting. So that brings us to the 7 a.m. turn. So far, there has been no action, no losses, nothing going on as far as all this goes. So what is up next? I teased earlier about a few things. So the first major twist of the game is going to occur at 7 a.m. You are not going to want to miss the next video because it's going to be fun, at least for me, and those of you viewing who are not part of this game. Both commanding generals are going to have some very difficult decisions to make with limited intel, as the fog of war is dialed up in this game by yours truly. But I will say both sides are going to be really unhappy with the coming developments that I have created for them. It's not going to be easy, and they're going to have some really complicated choices to make as far as how they move and react to the things that are thrown at them. And as I said, it's fun for us to watch, not so much fun for them to play in, but you know, that's what they come for. You don't sign up for one of my games thinking it's going to be easy. So that brings us to the end of episode 2. As I mentioned, in the next episode, we will discuss the coming twist in the game, and we're going to see how the two sides react to this situation. And we're also going to watch the next few hours of gameplay, as the sides will likely begin to spot one another more frequently across the battlefield. As always, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Go ahead and hit the like button on there if you liked it, which I surely hope you did. And be sure to check out the next episode because things are going to get much, much more interesting. Thanks for watching.